I said, Charlie, I don't know what to tell you, but.
And so the overall cash position of the school district increased by roughly $3.9 million.
Yeah.
Combination of paying invoices, payroll, and other construction costs. The total cash position is currently $91.5 million, which compares favorably from last year of, the total cash position is favorable by $8.1 million from last year. Of note is the Franklin Credit Union account. Its 1-year interest rate of 2.03% will be expiring next month in February. Any change to the rate will be monitored, and if necessary, the funds will be moved to another account with a higher rate. We do not know what rate they're going to place our funds in at that time. Is there any questions on the treasurer's report?
Have you started shopping that at all, Tim, or is it too early to determine?
I haven't, because I want to get closer to the end of January. It only takes a day to wire the money and set up the account. We can do that relatively fast. My hope is that they do not want to change our 2.03%, so I'm going to keep my fingers crossed, but I know that that's not going to be the case. I'm expecting it to go to 0.1%.
Okay, we'll be shopping it then.
That's correct. We'll be looking to put that somewhere else. The next item on the agenda is the budgetary transfers. The budgetary transfers were provided and attached to the agenda. Is there any questions on the budgetary transfers? Okay.
And just Tim, real quick. When I looked at those, is it generally practice to move money out of the principal's budget into technology? Or is there sort of some level of budgetary discretion on those? I think there was one in Eagleville, if I remember.
They were actually buying a piece of technology, and they were offsetting the cost on that one, if memory serves correct. But just, do you want to tell me which one you're looking at there?
Let me go back.
I have Office of Principal to Technology Support Service Eagle.
It was the $4,500. I think it was $4,500, if I recall.
Yes. Okay. So in that one, that's a different situation. So in this one, what's occurring is it's just a move from one Eagleville budget account to another Eagleville budget account. So they're moving money from the Office of the Principal's supplies. So they bought supplies, but they're technically technology related. So they can't be in the supply. It has to be in the 650 code. So they're making a move according to that.
Okay.
In this case, it's actually coming from the Office of the Principal into the technology supplies.
Okay. And that's probably COVID related, I assume.
Or they could have bought something in numerous little things that add up to that number.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's only when they go between programs that we do that. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the expenditure reports.
Yeah.
Right now, revenue is up to 79.53% of the budget, which is 2.54% higher than the prior year. Total collections are $88.9 million versus $87.2 million of the prior year. Local revenue is at 91.56% of budget, which is 2.5% higher than the prior year. Local real estate collections are at $74.1 million versus a budget of $75.4 million. I know that the tax collectors were completing their fiscal years mainly because they brought in paperwork for me to sign, and the final collections associated with that, they're going to be deposited this month and will show up in the January financials and reporting. EIT collections are currently at $3.4 million out of a budgeted $6.4 million. Berkheimer is expecting us to stay roughly right around that number and trend on in based on their estimates from the beginning of the year. So we are trending okay right there.
They still feel good about that number, Tim?
Yeah, we usually get a lot. It comes in quarters more than anything else. So yes, I do feel we'll be okay, and we'll get up to that 6 point. We might go above it if people start returning to work and more income is generated. But right now, some school districts are seeing no drop in their EIT. We are seeing a drop in our EIT, and some are being hit hard. So it really depends on what's going on in your county and your school district with regards to EIT. Right now, like I said, Berkheimer's last presentation to us was that we should hit right around $6.5 million.
Okay, thank you.
And Tim, that was, I think I recall 10 or 12% lower than the previous year is what we budgeted?
It was actually 10% reduction from the initial Berkheimer projection, which comes out in December. Clearly, when they gave us the projection in December, the shutdown in March would have a bearing on that. So what we did is, a lot of the business directors in the county were looking at a 20% reduction in everything that I saw and talking, plus the fact that 4 out of the 5 largest contributors would be what would be considered essential businesses. It made sense to be erring on the conservative side of the recommendation, so we stuck with the 10% reduction versus a higher number.
So just to summarize, that $600,000 or $700,000 less at this time last year we expected to receive. We lowered it in the last 6 months of the budget process, and it looks like we're going to be somewhere around that. Is that correct?
$720,000 reduction.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. State revenue is currently at 37.11% of budget, which is below the prior year of 38.95%. We did receive our property tax relief fund, and all other funds are being paid on schedule from the state, which is positive because if you recall, we ended the prior fiscal year with some items trailing, and we did get them, but they were a little trailing on the timing. So we're all caught up to date with the state. Federal revenue is at 54.59%, which obviously is significantly higher than the prior year. That's directly related to the grants. We got about, the ones that we just recently got, another 700. We got a total of about $700,000, $800,000 worth of grant money that will play into that, and I'll get into that a little bit later as we go on. Expenses, salary and benefits, we paid about $18.2 million and $13 million in benefits, combined $31.2 million in salary and benefits. At the same point in time last year, the salary expenditures were actually higher than the prior year by about $364,000. But we also lowered the budget by about $550,000. So there's an offset to that. And we do expect salaries to be lower than last year due to the budgetary changes that were made. Benefits are, and I'll point out that remember in that one thing that will have a bearing on that contract negotiations could change that position, as we did not include any increase in the MEA salaries in the salary and benefit in the salary portion of that budget for this year. Benefits are $180,700 more than the prior year. The budget was increased by $384,000. It's no surprise that our expenses continue to go up on the benefits, PESers, healthcare, prescription, all those different items contribute into the increase with regards to the budget. With regards to operating expenditures are at 40.53% of the budget versus 44.5% the prior year. Overall cash expenditures are $9.6 million currently for the fiscal year, and versus $10.8 million for the prior fiscal year, about $1.2 million below what we spent last year at the same point in time. Obviously, this is a direct result of COVID and the instruction model of virtual versus in person. When we get into the surplus, I can get a little bit more into detail on where that's coming from. The 300 series, which is the professional services, purchase professional services, is about $911,000 below last year. The 400 series, purchase property services, is about $6,700. So that's tracking right along the lines as you would expect. That's where your the 500 series is $688,000 $8,000 below last year at the same point in time. That's due to transportation costs. There are some other costs which are increasing, mainly because of the virtual instruction. To give you an example, the biggest change in our 500 series is transportation costs. First students costs year to date are currently $555,000 versus last year at the same point in time we had paid $1.5 million. So we're $1 million short compared to what we have paid first student at this same point in time. Supplies are $299,000 above last year at the same point in time, mainly due to COVID purchases and grant purchases. These supplies are currently offset by the grant money, and the district will or has already received. The COVID grant total that we've received year to date is $816,798.58, of which $814,148.33 of these funds belong to the Methacton School District, with another $2,650.25 that is set aside for private, non-public, and parochial schools. All the funds associated with the Methacton School District have been spent and reported to the correct entity. COVID-related expenditures not related to grants total currently $335,212.96. The COVID reserves funds that we budgeted for in the 2020-2021 fiscal year was $325,851. We're obviously almost about $10,000 more than we had anticipated. As we continue to expend funds beyond the budget, the savings in other areas will be transferred into this line item. So to the budget transfers, money will come out of let's just say the principal's supply account, and would be moved into this area. Obviously, this would be a different program and therefore require board approval, so you would see that cash movement also. The 700 series is currently $106,000 below at the same point in time, but obviously it's a smaller category with regards to our budget. Any questions so far on those items?
Tim, have we been able, I know it's kind of a loose target number, have we been able to do any type of forecasting as to what possible future COVID-related, specifically PPE expenses? Have we done a current analysis of how much supply we have left? You know, we got 45 days left of X. Do we see any big ticket items coming down the path, or is it just who knows?
Right now, it's kind of a who knows. If you look at masks, we bought a lot of masks for kids that would not have the mask. We also intended more students in school when we made some of these things and decisions. So I really think it's going to be as we go, what we're going to need. I don't see any major big ticket items. I mean, there are some changes, obviously, with the way that we're running the schools and the future of the running of the schools and how things will roll. There's some items that we're looking at changes and the impacts that they will have to the budget. And as we go through from this point forward, we'll be looking at what, if any, impact they will have long term.
Thank you.
So I had one quick question. This goes up to basically the staffing. Curious where when you're looking at staffing with proctors, guest teachers, substitutes, I know that we were taking the substitute and kind of taking that and shifting it to the staff. So is there an additional cost set aside of what we had to spend, or has it leveled out, or has it been, what are you finding when it comes to the coverage?
Well, right now we have, so in the 300 series is where the subs are.
Okay.
But at this point in time, we haven't had enough to make any transfers from the salary and benefits into the substitutes. Now, obviously, with the potential return to school and the need for subs, that could change. A lot of this stuff is new for us as well as the board members into how dynamic things can change. If we stay the way we are, the need for subs probably won't be nearly as much as we typically would expect. If we come in person with quarantining, COVID, and medical related issues, there's going to be the need for subs. So that's going to be a very dynamic and fluid area for us. Anything else? to get in the finish.
I'm sorry, Tim,
Yeah, sure.
taking notes there, I'm picking my hand up. First student,
I can't even see it on my screen, to be honest with you.
what's that? Oh, I apologize, no, I was trying
your
to,
hand up won't help me.
okay, duly noted. First student, have they stuck their hand out again, or are they kind of doing what they're doing?
Yes, first student. So on November 25th, Act 136 was passed in the state, which allows school districts to pay the non-variable, meaning the fixed costs. I don't know why they said non-variable. I have no idea. Fixed costs is so much simpler. But that's what they actually wrote in the act. Will allow us to pay similar to what we did last year, an agreed upon number to first student, which would then allow us to receive the full subsidy next year. Obviously, our agreement with them last year got us the full subsidy this year. So they have asked for it. We've had conversations with the administration, has had conversations as to trying to figure out what recommendation, what options we could provide. Our goal is to have something in February to provide to the property committee at the transportation piece, and to bring that obviously 2 days later to the finance committee, and then go from there and see where we go.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Now I got all four of you on the board here. Okay. Just finishing this off, debt expenses are currently about $81,000 below budget. Nothing surprising there. But with regards to the healthcare report, September financials show a decrease in our fund balance of about $213,000. This places our year-to-date change at a loss of fund balance of about $44,000.
Hey, Tim, before you go there, can you just explain to me on the budget, on the debt, shouldn't that be, I guess maybe there's some other debt there, but shouldn't our long-term debt be knowing exactly when we're going to be paying 2 times a year?
Yeah, our long-term, our debt and our debt is. However, there's other factors that are included in that. Anything in the 800 and or 900 series. So one of those items, I'd have to really pull up the entire thing here to answer your question as to what they are. Just bear with me. I want to give you some good information on that. So the 800, there's in that area is dues and fees. So membership dues, any fees we have to do. There's claims and judgments. So any lawsuit claims or judgments against us. Obviously, there's the interest, which wouldn't be on target, and any contingency. Donations, which we don't do any of that stuff. So I'll skip to the next piece, which is the 900. Also 900. Redemption of any principal, fund transfers, so there's the capital reserve, any capital reserve fund transfers or any other transfers. So really where that's coming from, Mr. Winters, is it's really coming in the 800 series, dues and fees and the claims against the LEA. So we do budget a certain amount of dues and fees, and we do budget a certain amount of claims that could potentially go against the school district. Typically with regards to special education claims or IEP claims.
Okay, so there is knowledge of certain ones during the budget process, but there are others that happen after the fact, or so you anticipate the ones happening after the fact with some type of budgetary number. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm just trying to, all we're trying to do is to understand if there is, where all the numbers are coming from, and if there's reasons to understand that we're hedging conservatively or not. So that's the only reason I'm asking you.
Fair enough. So the debt's the debt. It's whatever the interest is and whatever the principal is, that's what's put into the budget. There's no padding, there's no ifs, ands, or buts.
It's the other stuff. Yeah.
It's the dues and fees, it's the claims and judgments where you have to look at, well, historically, Methacton School District, and I'm making it up because clearly I don't have anything, you can see where I am, I don't have any paperwork in front of me that can help me with this. Let's just say that a claim was 50,000 in the first quarter, 60,000 in the second quarter, and our run rate over the several couple years may have been about 100,000. So we may budget 100,000. Given where we are so far year to date, we may only be at 25,000, and that's what creates that variance for us. There's no padding I want to be clear, there's no, whatever the interest due and whatever's due, that's what's put into the budget for the bond and the ESCO.
Yeah, understood. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I understand. I figured there had to be something else in the 800 and 900 for us to be off. So
If it was me, the 800, those items would not be in that series, and I would have a specific for debt, but it's not just debt. And that's PDE's decision, not Tim Bricker's decision. I don't
Okay,
have anything to say.
that's okay. You can't change the rules now. I understand. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. Getting back to the healthcare reports, said the fund balance decreased by about $213,000 in September. Obviously, there's a trailing item with regards to the healthcare reports as to the timing and when this healthcare consortium will sign off on that. This places the year-to-date change at a loss of $44,000 for the year. We still have a healthy fund balance, but one of the things we wanted to do is trying to build that up from the $500,000 up more. We should be closer to $1 million to $2 million in there to be where we'd want to be on a recommendation number. It's closer to $1 million with the IBNR close to $1 million. And the changes that were made at the healthcare consortium are supposed to get us there. We always go heavy in the beginning of the year, and then towards the end of the year we start going more positive, so we'll be monitoring that as we move along. Is there any questions on the healthcare report? Okay. Master plan financials. I've added this to both the property committee and the finance committee so that everyone can hear what's going on with regards to the master plan financials. Total committed funds are $4.4 million with bond fundings totaling an additional $20.3 million. There are total available funds of $24.7 million. With regards to the master plan projects, we are closed out for 2018, 2019. For the 2020 projects, we have open balance of about $604,000, with the anticipation that this will drop once we get to the closeouts and all the other aspects associated with that are reconciled out. The Master Plan 2021 projects, currently the board has only approved about $900,000, of which $227,000 has been paid. The Eagleville project is currently out to bid. Depending on the bids and the direction of the board, that would obviously change the 2021 projects. And the high school canopy project is going to the school board for approval later this month. Arrowhead new construction, the contracts are all executed. Contracts total $26.3 million. The fueling station project, the contracts have also been fully executed, and the project is moving forward, and they're planning a kickoff meeting on that. So that's very positive. Obviously, also having transportation, I'm very interested in the fueling project getting done and making that a much smoother project. Like I said, just to kind of go into that for 2 seconds, that is going to have some positives for the school district. One, and these are factored into the budget, but the one item will be that we'll be able to buy a regular fuel at consortium prices. They won't be going to a gas station because we are putting in a regular and a diesel fuel pump. And two, the securities and controls that we'll be able to put in place with regards to the fuel and the use of the fuel will just make me feel better as a business manager. So long term, it's not massive savings, but it's savings and every penny counts. Any questions on the master plan? Okay. The next item on the agenda is the tax collector compensation. Under Resolution 21-01, The recommendation, subject to board approval, and the finance committee are saying we can move it forward to the board, is to move the current rate of $3.45 to $3.60 effective July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2024, and then the $3.75 effective July 1st, 2024 through June 2026. As a side note, I've looked back the past several years, we've given a 15-cent increase every 2 years on this. This is in line with that. It's also very acceptable in talking with the current tax collector, saying that it is something that could cover the costs and expenses that they have. Is there any questions on the tax collector compensation?
And what's the actual impact to us of that change?
It's so we do it. Let's just say one of them is about 7,000. So you're gonna get me with my math now. 70 times.
I just wanted just the ballpark was good enough.
It's about total of about $10,000.
All right, is that? I mean, this is minor, so I don't want to.
Or $1,000 or something like that. But it's 70 times 15. Unfortunately, because I'm using my computer for everything, I can't flip screens the way I usually can to get to my calculator.
Is this rate? Is this comp? I mean, the way that it's funny because of the way that the resolution is worded, it made it sound like we had, just approved this resolution recently, and because of the passage of time, we're re-amending it, which is not the case, right? I mean, we've been set for 2 years, and this was approved, I guess, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I couldn't find a reference to it.
Every 4 years, the tax collector compensation has to be reapproved by the school board and any changes to it.
Okay.
Any other questions on this? Okay to move to the school board?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna change up the items and get the next simple item out of the way. The mileage reimbursement rate. Obviously, we approved the IRS mileage reimbursement rate. Currently, it has been reduced to 56 cents per mile. This would be a 1.5 cent reduction in the rate currently or previously, and it's effective January 1st, 2021. Is there any questions on the change in the mileage rate? Okay to bring forward to the school board?
Yes.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the forecast. And I'm going to think I can do a new share here. All right, so you should see the forecast up on the screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So right now, I'm just going to keep it pretty much high level as to where this is. There's about $455,000 of potential surplus in the local revenue. State will be down by about $429,000. Federal will be up $326,000. The others, that's already money we've already received. Obviously, we budgeted $0. We received $10,000. That gives us a net increase in revenue of about $362,000. So we are projecting an additional $362,000 in our revenue. Our expenditures, we're expecting the salary to be roughly about $23,000 favorable. The benefits are going to be $823,000 favorable. Part of why the benefits are so favorable to try and give everyone some different choices that people take. Some people have to then pay their medical when they take different avenues of time off. That's one piece. Plus the anticipation and changes that the staff makes with regards to the benefit elections which occur after the budget's completed. Operating expenses, $4.5 million favorable. It's a direct relationship to the items that we talked about with regards to running a virtual school, and we'll get a breakdown of some of this as we go down. Debt service is potentially going to be unfavorable depending on claims that come in. Obviously, that could change, that could not change. Again, all this information is where we are as of today. Decisions with the board to come in, to not come in, to bring everyone back, to bring 5 people back, whatever the decision is, obviously has a drastic impact on this. And I just want to sit there and state that we're trying to forecast a year that's never occurred before. So it is where we are right now based on the information that's available at hand. So to break down some key areas as to where this is coming from, grants are pumping up our revenue by about $800,000, as you heard previously. Right now, with no changes in what we're doing with First Student, we should have at least a $3 million savings there. Substitutes, obviously, I just said, depending on the changes that occur right now, we're looking at a $700,000 savings. And obviously, if no one's in the school, the lights aren't really on, the heaters don't have to be cranked up for the first couple of years, and we're through part of the winter and fall, we should have about a $200,000 savings in utilities. That's about $4.7 million of high-level items. The remaining variance is about $900,000, and that can be from professional services to different supplies to so many different things. It's kind of where we are at this point in time with trying to figure out where we're going to be. But clearly there's going to be a surplus. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Is there any questions on this information? Ralph and Drew, you both clicked off at the same time. Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Drew. You're the chair.
I was going to say no, and you hit the nail on the head. We all get in a time machine and try and predict this budget. It was a fool's errand, so I don't have a problem with any of these numbers.
I just want to make sure everyone understands, when we initially prepared and approved the budget, the anticipation was we would be back in school in August. So that's how the budget was formed. And you have to make that decision, because if you don't make that decision, I'd be talking about a $5.6 million shortfall, and you'd all be looking for my job.
So just, Tim, so I'm clear, so the numbers we've got here are based on a continuation of the current educational model. In other words, you're basically assuming what we've done so far, we continue?
Well, yes, because when we run the buses, as an example, when we run the buses, it's real simple, and we run from Methacton, our costs are pretty close to what we budget them to be.
Yeah.
Okay, when we're only running about 20, 15 to, say 20, 25% of the buses for the non-public schools that are open, and probably closer to 20 than to 25%, because even some of them are closed. We're only spending, as a great example, in the month of December last year, we spent about $470,000 on routes. This past December, my bill is $155,000. So one of the driving forces is transportation. If we're not open and we're not running the buses, we're not spending nearly the transportation budget. I'm assuming we're going to go back and start running some of these things, because that fluctuation could change that. It could be more, it could be less, depending on how many routes we end up running.
Yeah, so certainly, I guess my point in asking that is to just point out that this is kind of the worst case scenario in terms of surpluses, right? Or best case, depending on just on your point of view. But hopefully, we're moving kids back into school this week. We're running buses. We continue this way. Hopefully, we keep everybody in school. Can you bracket this then? Let's assume, we go back and we're, the plan that's been proposed about, getting K-6 back in, how much does that impact these numbers,
I'd have to really sit down and think about that. The first 4 months of the year for First Student, and short of us going with, so assume we don't do Act 136. I usually pay bills for September, October, November, December, probably about, that should be about at least, including December, should be at least $2 million. We're going to spend 1.6. So I already have $1.4 million. That transportation, if we start running anything, could go down a little bit, but the ins and outs, and remember, it's not just our schools. Some of the other schools that we go to, some of the special education schools we do run to are closed and they're virtual. And the ins and outs of each day, it's going to be, I mean, it would be a tough guess to try and figure out, just like everyone else is trying to figure out what's going on with this year. Then you have, every day we get told that a school's opening, then the next day we're told it's closed, then it's opening, then it's closed. So, I mean, this is where we stand as of today. If we start running the buses, could it get a little less? Yes, it will get less, but we will have a significant surplus this year.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Like Drew, right? This is hard to predict where we're going to end up, and who knows how things shake out from here. And hopefully, vaccines start rolling out a little more quickly and whatnot. We're back to normal, but okay. Yeah, I guess when we come back in February and look at this again, let's I think it would be good to try to bracket it a little bit and just see see where we might end up on the more on the more conservative side.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, well, sorry.
No, Paul, you're in the background again.
That's all right. You can still hear me. What on the benefits side of things? So 800 on 30 million, and we talked about benefit elections and different choices versus what we budgeted. Are we developed enough where we can line that out? I mean, I know we talked before about kind of person by person, but we were off by benefits a lot last year too. And I'm concerned when we go into the budgeting again for this year to make sure that we've got that lined out.
Yeah, I can break down either in the next finance committee meeting, or I can do it in a Friday memo, which is probably more appropriate to put it in a Friday memo. Not that I care if I share it with the public or put it in the next meeting, just to get it to you faster rather than waiting for the next meeting. I can break it out by code. So you're going to have tuition that we didn't really spend a lot of. We actually spent about $40,000 on a $20,000 for unemployment this year. So you're going to have those items. You're going to have your Social Security and your teasers are going to be roughly where, depending on where the staff is with regards to the pay and who's delayed and who's not delayed and what positions are open. And then you're going to have the healthcare benefits and where they actually shook out to based on the final elections. So I'll use myself so that I'm not picking any person's name. If I'm on full medical and when the budget's approved, by the end of June, I could choose that, you know what, I'm going to take the cash option. So instead of the school district spending $25,000 on my medical, they're just giving me whatever my buyout is. So those are the things that play that role, and it's a matter of timing for when our open elections end. So there's no way to get it. We bring over everyone that's in there, and we budget for what they have that day. And then we cut it. It's not padded. There's no additional information in. So whatever Tim Bricker has on the day we finalize the budget, which is early June, it is, and that's because I have a lot of reports and a lot of forms to complete, so I can't wait till the last second. It is going to be Tim Bricker's salary increase, whatever that's going to be the next year, based on contract or agreements or whatever it is. And then it's going to be his medical, whatever options I have for medical, prescription, vision, dental. And then it's going to be whatever the Social Security is and whatever the PSERS rate is. And it's straightforward. We don't put any extra people in. The only people that we put in the budget are the open positions that we're waiting to fill, so that we have those positions to put in when they are hired. It is the anticipation that those positions are hired for the start of the school year.
Okay. Yeah, I don't particularly need it for the memo. Just as we go through this and we look at, as it aligns with budgeting, I think it's important that we understand exactly where
Sure.
those deltas were. So that's all. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Winters?
Yeah, I was gonna, Ralph took, some of my questions on benefits, cause the 800,000 seems like we should be, oops, I'm like, covered up my mic there, sorry about that. The $800,000, seemed really high for a variance after 6 months, but, you explained some of that, but I agree that we sort of need the supporting schedules, and review that in February, that'd be great.
And remember, that's just a forecast. It's
No, I
what we
understand.
may or may not be, and that's not where we stand today.
Yeah, no, it's a similar question to the debt, though, honestly, because to me, it's pretty locked in, and we know, at least I know from the negotiation, there wasn't a lot of movement in the medical choices this year, despite the increased cost associated with the 7.5–8% that we got, and then also the additional percentage that shared that the NEA is paying. So we didn't see a lot of people move to a different, even though their out-of-pocket dollars did go up sort of fairly significantly this past year. So you referenced the grants of 800, which also would mean an operating expense of 800 the other way, but we're still $4.5 million. So could you give a little more color related to the 4.5? Because it's really 5.3 in my opinion.
So when you're looking at that $800,000 with the grants, a lot of that would have been, the reason I didn't net the two together, I know exactly what you're talking about. The reason I didn't put the two together is because the COVID expenditures on those grants, had we not gotten them, would have been spent somewhere else in the budget. You would not have been buying all the one-to-one items you would have had. You would have had more paper, you would have had pencils, you would have had all other things that would have been spent money on. So they kind of, the supplies numbers would have been down, the professional services, the Wilson Root teachers. I mean, it would have all set somewhere else. Because you're virtual, you're spending money on, let's just stick with the Chrome. We bought everyone Chromebooks one-to-one, so we got all these Chromebooks. If we weren't virtual, you would have had the Wilson teachers with people, you would have had therapists with people, you would have had supplies going out. So kind of, that would have transferred from one to another. So yes, you could look at it that way, but my point of view is, if we weren't virtual, we would have spent the money somewhere else. If we weren't virtual, we would have never gotten that revenue. We would have gotten that revenue we shouldn't have gotten that revenue if we would have been in person, is the way it was looking at.
All right, and I know we spent a lot of time on the transportation already, and you mentioned the subs. So it's January, but I like to track this over time because it tells us things as they change. Because I know most of you sort of locked in on a pretty good forecast. March, April, I believe last year, of what the surplus looked like it was going to be, and some thought it was way understated, and obviously it wasn't. It was a lot. I get that, but it certainly wasn't an $8 million number. But I realize it's early in the process, but identifying having this done over the next 3 or 4 months, actually the next 6 months for that matter, and then the follow up in the new after the audit really tells us a lot of how we should be budgeting. So thanks.
It does get clearer come by around March, April, just because there's more information at hand. It's much easier to look at the numbers and say, where does this building anticipate the rest of its 3 months to go? So you're right, the closer we get to the end, the tighter I can make it based on easier conversations than guessing. Obviously, that requires us to be a slightly more normal world than we are today. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to try again and share another video, another screen. This will be the preliminary budget for tonight.
So as Mr. Bricker is preparing to share the proposed preliminary budget, I want to make clear for the members of the Finance Committee that this is what it is, what is titled, a proposed preliminary budget. We've started a process by probably late September, early October, working through principals and departments in order to accumulate information and have discussions related to the things that are needed in terms of our planning for next school year. This presentation, like other presentations that we've shared with you on the budget, starts off with some information about the school district in specific. For the purposes of this evening's discussion, we'll ask Mr. Bricker to advance to the slides where we start talking about the budget and then around the figures, and we can pick up those earlier slides at a presentation that we would have before the full board. Mr. Bricker?
Okay. See if I can make this a little bit bigger. I might have to use a little bit of up and down so you guys can see everything. So one of the things we wanted to put in the budget this year is to give everyone a little bit of historical background as to where the budget has been. Obviously, we budget net zero, so about $107 million, $109.4 million, $111.9 million, and $111.8 million. Yes, that is not an anomaly. Our budget did go down for this year by roughly $73,000. In the next one here, I'm trying to show you where we had our changes in budget. So local revenue is up $3.4 million. State revenue is up by $173,000. Total revenue increase is $3.6 million. Salaries have increased $2.5 million. Benefits have increased $1.8 million. And that is based on the first look, which we'll get into later today. Operational expenses have increased by $1.4 million, and debt service is down by about $905,000. Total expenses have increased by $4.7 million. This gives us a shortfall of 1.15, 1.16, or simply said $1.2 million. This chart just gives us an overview to see where they're coming from. As you can see here, 68% of our funds that the school district gets is real estate taxes. That's tied to the assessed values and the millage, and this is the rural area that can only be controlled by the school board. The Act 1 taxes are based on actual collections and income. Basic subsidy is not in the school district's purview. The state, special education subsidy, federal revenue, and other services. So realistically, the biggest thing that we have is the real estate taxes that are actually controlled by the school board. And again, that's only 68% of the budget. So here's our assumptions that we have. Real estate taxes increased by about $2.9 million. The millage rate used in this presentation is at the Act 1 index of 3%. The collection rate increased from 95.64% to 96.08%, based on assessed values as of November 2020. As everyone knows, we do update the assessed values every time we do a projection so that we have current information. Earned income tax increased by $620,000 based on Berkheimer's forecast. Delinquent real estate tax collections increased by $315,000, and interest income was reduced by $354,000. The state revenue was reduced by $444,000. That was due to a grant. Obviously, we don't get that grant each year, so that's going to be coming out. And Social Security and PSERS increased by $617,000. Federal revenue is budgeted at level. Eligibility for exceptions, we have the Act 1 exception, and we have the first one being PSERS. When we ran the calculation, we were not eligible for PSERS. And as you can see, we're not eligible for the special education. Typically, we are eligible for these in every other year, so we were eligible for last year, chose not to use any of them. So, as expected, we were not eligible for any this year. This will show the real estate taxes and how we come to our calculation. Right here is the new assessed values, $2.6 billion, 3% millage rate, turns into 31.779. Gives us a gross tax levy of $83.5 million. There's no exception, so they're quite simply zero. We have our gaming funds that reduces this, which is $2.1 million. Gives us a net tax levy of $81 million at 96.08%. That gives us 78. Now the reason that's not 100%, that's because of taxes not paid as well as taxes paid in protest have to be accounted for. We do use a 3-year average, so if you look at the 3 years here, you can actually see where we get into our number. What's this mean to the homeowner? So, with the 3% increase, this would be an increase of $161.31 based on the average mean assessed value, not home value, assessed value of roughly $175,000. So that would give the overall assessed value of $175,000 roughly at $5,538.44. So if you had an assessed value of $200,000, that would translate into a value of $126,000, which is based on the common level ratio, 2.13, and that's set by the county. That would mean that your increase to your tax would be $185.12 for a total tax of $6,355.80. Obviously, I have different tiers there for everyone to see.
I'm just gonna say it now, Tim, can you expand some of the lower tiers? We've talked about this a couple of times.
And I was just thinking the same thing, Paul.
I mean, I have no problem because I think it's helpful for those that have big houses and also those that have commercial properties. But there's also many people that have $300,000 valued houses.
Not a problem. I will go 150, 150 if you want.
Something that allows everybody.
Yeah, sorry. I just copied the form that I had and
I know, but I think it's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, you did ask for it before. I just used the same one trying to get this done. I will make sure I update that on the future one. Okay. This is the calculation for the Peaser, so everyone can see how the calculation is done. I'm sorry. As you can see, we did not qualify for any. Then we have the calculations for the special education. Again, you can see how the calculation is done and we did not qualify for it. So going into our revenue. Salary and benefits, 69.64%. Debt service is down to 8.63%. Operating expenses are at 21.73%. Staffing, at this point in time, we're not projecting to add or change any staffing from where we stand currently. The only position that was added this year from last year is the assistant superintendent that was added in the 2020-2021 fiscal year. So obviously that's in this year's, it's going to be included in next year's. There's, well, be it perceived change, there's really no change year to year because that decision was made in the current year. One of the things driving the impact to the school district is charter schools. As you can see, here's a chart for cost per student. I'll get to a screen where you can actually read the numbers. It's more visual for right now. And then you have the counts that we have. You're looking at right now, I'll give you this one right up here is 119 for this year. Last year we had 74, and that's total students in charter schools. So this will be the numbers that actually go with it. Oops, sorry. So last last year we had 64 students in regular education in the charter schools. The cost was $16,177.24, which cost the school district $1,035,000. Currently, we're at 97 students into the charter schools. Regular education, the cost is lower, $16,077.35, but the total cost, because of the increase in students, is now about $1.6 million. That's up $634,000 over the 3-year average in cost. When you look at special education, we were at 12 students in special education, 10 students in education last year, and we're at 22 this year. The cost went from $37,682.72 up to $38,324. We're looking at a $376,000, $376,827 last year. Now we're looking at $843,000 this year. So if you combine the two numbers together, you're looking at 1.4 versus 2.4 in amount. Obviously, that's $1 million increase in expenditures.
Tim, can you go back to that for a second?
Sure.
I know I ask about this every year when we talk about tuition costs. So I guess my question with all this, right? This is a great data point, and obviously a lot of it is COVID related in terms of the numbers for this year, right? People that don't agree with the educational model, done what they think is best for their kids and taking their children elsewhere. So how are you dealing with that in the budget for the coming year?
So in the budget, we assume you're looking at how it is, and in discussions with pupil services, the current budget, and obviously this is fluid, so as things change as we go through the budgeting process and we open up and students come back faster, we can obviously make changes accordingly and would. Right now, we assume 50% of those students that left the school district will return. So the difference between the 10 and 22, we're expecting is 12. We're expecting 6 to return. We're expecting 6 to stay in virtual. And you have the 64 and the 97. Obviously, we took halfway point between them. Half of them coming back, half of them staying out, and that's how we calculated the number for the budget.
Okay, thanks. I think that's reasonable.
And as we open up, if students decide to convert back, obviously we'll adjust accordingly. But that's where we stand as of today, and that's the information we have to design the budget. So, here's some of the information. Staffing increase of $2.5 million, no new staff. That's due to supplemental contracts. MEA, MESPA, Teamsters, Confidentials, and the MOA all have open contracts. Increases are factored in based on contract negotiation parameters into the budget. Benefits increased by $1.8 million. That includes the healthcare consortium's rate increases based on the first of 3 projections. Open Choice 1, which went up 11.1%, so we've gotten a little bit more technical in how we are doing our increases. So instead of doing the increases as a straight percentage across medical, we're actually looking at where the increases are by plan. So Open Choice 1 is 11.1, Open Choice 2, 12.3 roughly. The POS is going up 11.7, and Open Choice 3 is going up 11.1. Prescription, there's no increase at this point in time. That's a direct result of COVID and the impact of not using a lot of our medical stuff with regards to prescriptions. Vision and dental increased 2%, and there's no change in staff contributions currently factored into the budget. That's due to the fact we have open contracts, and I'm not sure where the numbers will fall. So if the numbers do stay flat, that's where we will be in a good one. If contracts get agreed upon and changes occur and the contribution rates are established, we'll factor them into the budget at that point in time. Beezer's rate increased from the 2021 number to 21-22 from 34.51 to 34.94.
So Tim, the prescription, I'm sorry if I zoned out there for a second. Is that what the consortium has given us as a projection, or they have given us nothing?
No increase is what they projected for us.
And what's the justification that they're saying that is the possibility? Is it because of usage? Is it the experience?
So there's several changes that have been done at the consortium that we've been working on. One of them is Save On, which has saved Methacton School District about $175,000. Recently, as the consortium, we put in utilization management structure. So that is going to save us a significant amount of money. Our stop loss went from 200,000 down to 150,000. There's all positive things that we've been able to work with the consortium that are helping control. Really doesn't help our medical based on the actuarial rates of the medical plans, but it did help. A lot of the things we were able to do was with prescriptions. There's also rebates that we've been getting when we changed from CVS to Express Scripts. Sorry, I've struggled with some of the names sometimes because there's so many of them. So we've had savings there, and there's a lot of discounts that we get. There's just a lot of things that we've been doing. It's really affected the prescription side of the healthcare.
So it's mainly the consortium's ability to deliver the same plan more effectively. Because it doesn't seem like we haven't obviously changed the plans with any of the contracts. So it's just the way it's transacted, I guess, over the last year. The consortium's doing a better job with that.
That, and again, COVID is playing a role in a lot of this also. So we'll have to see where the second and third looks end up going. But it is possible that could stay at a no increase for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I would think people would still be taking their high blood pressure. But, okay.
Yes, but you're not getting your elective surgeries, which then you need different medications associated with that. And I think it's not so much the known items that you need on a regular basis, it's the extenuating items. People are not going out there. Take me, I haven't blown my knee out this year, so I don't need knee surgery and all the painkillers and anti-inflammatories that go along with that. So those are different things that are not occurring, that down the road I think we will have to deal with. But for right now, it is driving down our cost.
Okay, thank you.
So Tim, one more question. So come back to the benefits question. Net, you've got an increase of 1.8. Is that an increase from the budget of the current year, or is that an increase of 1.8 over what you just forecast, which was an $800,000 surplus?
No, this is budget to budget. Forecast is the forecast. This is budget to budget comparison.
Okay, so I know you said before when you talk about how you budget for benefits, right? And we take people's actual plans.
Mm-hmm.
Does this number account for those actual plans where there might have been a big delta?
Yep. So this takes into consideration where the entire staff was when we moved the staff into the budgeting module.
Okay.
And then each time we update that with the existing staff. So if John Smith, and dear God, please don't let us have a John Smith in the school district. If John Smith quits or leaves, then he would not be in the budget. If we decide to replace him, there's a calculation for the replacement that we choose to use, depending on what labor party they're in. And then there's healthcare benefits that go associated with that person. In most cases, let's say it's a professional staff member, obviously if it's a more tenured and more senior staff that decides to retire and not come back, we're going to replace it with a lower costing individual. And that's been the process we've done every single time. So it is the entire staff, it is their entire benefit elections that are moved in, and then we have the open positions that we have to fill and the assumptions that go along with our open positions, which again have not changed.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's just We're not adding, if there's not a position approved by the board, they're not in the budget. There's nothing in the budget that is not approved, a position approved by the school board.
Now, understood. I mean, we've been doing this for a couple of years,
Yep.
this way. I just wanted to make sure when we said, before we're saying 800 down and now we're 1.8 up, what the basis for that was year over year. Make sure that we're accounting for all the things that we said we did before. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, so the next time we do this, we'll get the second look. Predominantly, the second look has been, with the exception of 1 year, has gone down. Let's assume it goes down. So that 1.8 should shrink. Where it shrinks to depends on how much we go down. Last year, as a point of reference, this average here was 7.9. But conversely, this was 7.7 down here. So I don't expect any savings in the prescription, but I do anticipate as we go through the budgeting process and get more data to put into the budget that we will get some healthcare savings.
What's the usual timing of that second look, Tim?
February to March. All of it has to be in by so second look will definitely be in the March update. And then the third look should be right before the end of March, or it will be in April. March is our deadline to confirm that we are staying with the current healthcare consortium.
Thank you.
Operating costs have increased by $1.3 million. Building budgets decreased. So all the building budgets have decreased by a combined $45.2 thousand. Charter schools expenses, as we talked about, you have $646,000 increase in charter school expenses. That's, again, as we talked about earlier, 50% increased enrollment based on where we stand today. Our district outplace, we have students cost. This is just, it is what it is. We have students, we know who they are, we know what we're doing with that. That's going to cost us roughly $300,000. Utilities, we anticipate to go up by $179,000. Our rest of the facilities budget is relatively flat. Legal fees, we're increasing by $175,000 due to right to know request and legal costs associated with that. Curriculum text is increasing by $145,000. Last year, the decision was to buy the curriculum items in last year, for this year, in last year's budget. That's why you're seeing a $145,000 increase. If we did that last year to try and save costs, specifically with the amount of unknowns given to where we were and how new the pandemic was for everyone. As sad as that does sound coming out of my mouth. The curriculum text has to be put back in because we do need to buy them for next year. North Monco Technical Career Center is estimated to go up by $42,000. Obviously, once they get their budget done and approved, we'll actually put the actual number in, and that will be what it is. I figure an Act 1 increase on that, as I do every year for the first one. They could be below, they could be above. Most likely they're going to be below that number, and then that would adjust that number to where it is. Similarly, we make an estimate on our technology lease. Right now, we've budgeted about $700,000 for our technology leases. Once we get the actual leases, which typically come in late April, mid-May, early May, and then we'll put the actual number for the leases in, whatever the number is from our vendor. And then transportation cost increased by $46,000. We have a 1.7% increase based in our contractual obligation with First Students. Some of that is reduced because obviously we're not going to need to buy as much fuel next year because of the savings on fuel this year. So that will change some of that. Next slide. Any question on this slide before I go forward? Hearing none, moving on. Debt. So what's changed? We've decreased by $869,000. We have in this year a capital reserve transfer of $700,000. Given where we are in the budget, we don't feel that that's at this time a good decision, so we're pulling that out for this year's budget. The escrow lease increased by $573.21, and the bond cost decreased by $68,262.64. Again, they are the numbers that come right off the payment schedules that they provide to us.
So Tim, I'm sorry, what actually is now our capital reserve transfer in this budget? Is it eliminated or reduced? What is the final amount that's in the budget now?
0.
Okay.
It's eliminated completely. Okay. Top 10, professional salaries, retirement, medical, principal payment, contracted carriers, administrative salaries, professional salaries, Social Security, interest, and instructional assistant salaries are the top 10. All other salaries amount to $225,500 on all the other objects. So this totals to $116,500,000 roughly. We then do our 5-year projections. Here's some of the assumptions. Growth rates based on the assessed values of 11/30/2020. Annual growth rate of 0.5%. Earned income tax growth of 2%. Annual collection rate of 96%. Growth rate projections and all other revenues. The key things here, again, using our current first look medical. We're using the assumptions on contracts based on negotiating parameters. We've already discussed whatever the numbers are in what's put into the budget, obviously will then be translated into these assumptions. PSERS, right here, we have the PSERS numbers that we have. There's no change in general supplies. Special education operating expenses are 3.7%. Transportation, as I already alluded to, is 1.7%. Tuition in Pennsylvania charter schools is 5.86%, and VOTEC 2.6% thereafter. So where does this put us? Assuming we take the actual index in 2022 and no increases from 2023 to 2026, we'll end up with revenue of about $118.7 million with expenditures of $129.2 million. That year alone would have a $10.5 million loss, and a cumulative loss over the time period. We'd see our fund balance go from $7.8 million down. Our unassigned fund balance would end at a loss of $22.6 million. Moving into the 5-year projection, assuming a 2.3% increase for 2023 to 2026. We are forecasting a loss of each year from 1.2 as we currently stand, 2.3, 2.4, 2.7, 2.8. That over the 5-year period would end up putting our unassigned fund balance at a loss of $3.5 million roughly. 5-year projection with regards to staff costs. Salaries right now are estimated to be about $46.2 million. 5 years later, it would be $51.7 million right in here. You can see the retirement increasing, medical, ultimately salary and benefits will go to set from $76.9 million or 68.8%. all the way up to $88.1 million and 69.74% of our budget. This is where we stand actually. You can see how the actuals versus the budgets are. So we have actual in 2018, we ended up with a surplus of $2.5 million, almost $2.6 million. Revenue was $106.8 million. Expenses were $104.2. We had a $1.8 million surplus in 19. It was $110 million versus $108.3. 2020, we ended up with a $3.2 million budget as we knew coming in. $11.6 million versus revenue expenses of $8.4 million. We obviously budget 2021 to be flat, and we're budgeting, and I'll fix that 1905 formatting issue. we're projecting a $1.2 million loss. Looking at the top the major objects,
Tim,
100
before you
series.
go, Tim, before you get too far from this slide, if you go back to the 5-year projection on the assumptions, what was the assumption on additional debt for master plan?
We're taking $8.5 million each year. And with nothing right now, I don't think there's anything projected for next year.
Can you list that as an expenditure?
Yeah, I'll fix the expenditure on that, sure.
Thank you.
Getting into our major objects, so the 100 series is the salaries. Again, went 42.6, 44.2, 45.5, 46.2, and we're projecting $48.7 million. Benefits, 27.5, all the way up to 32.4. Purchase services, 6.6 to 6.9, 6.7. Purchase property services, 2.3 to 2.3. Other purchase services, 11 million to 11.9. Supplies from 3.1 and 18, or 3.2 to 3.5. Property, 380,000 to 159. Debt, let's just go to the 800 and 900 series from 10.7 to 10.4. Also added in a sensitivity analysis to try and give everyone an understanding of what happens as we change with the millage rate. Again, it's only 68% of the revenue, but it has the only area that we can technically control. So right now we're sitting at a 3% millage increase. For each 0.5% we reduce that, it's about $390,000 of reduced revenue. So if we go to 2%, our shortfall is 1.9. If we go to 1%, our shortfall is 2.7. And with a 0% tax increase, our shortfall is $3.5 million. PDE was attached as a separate document, which is a nice change, I'll be honest, from my point, because getting it into this presentation is difficult, so that was a big bonus for me this year. Building requests. This is a list of different building requests that we have. These are different projects that the administrators do. Typically, we've been budgeting $200,000 for this. Last year, we reduced it to $150,000. Given the state of the budget currently, we also kept that at $150,000. Not sure exactly which one of these will be added to the approved list, but we're in the process of getting costs. These will be the items that we work on, and again, will not exceed $150,000. These are all driven by the building principals who decide what items in their schools they feel would be nice to have improvements in. Where does that put us? We have a decision time. Our decision at the end of this next board meeting would be to authorize the board authorization to make available for public inspection or adopt resolution not to increase taxes above the Act 1 index. The deadline is January 28, 2021. That's where we're going to be. Given the fact that we do not have any exceptions, and I do not believe the Finance Committee is going to recommend for me to apply for a referendum, the resolution not to increase taxes above the Act 1 index is going to be the recommendation to the school board. At that point, then we just have a budget history and as to where we stand. So is there any questions at this point in time? Hey, Ralph. I can see it.
So on the building, not the building budget, but the kind of the principal's budget, the superintendent's budget there, that $200,000 that we put in every year. Those are all one-time charges. We're projecting a surplus that may be as high as $5 million. and will hopefully be a lot lower than that. And we've got $2.5 million that we put aside for Peasers that has not materialized, right? So we got to reallocate that money, or I suggest we should reallocate that money. What, aside from the $150,000 that we might put in this budget, what are the other one-time items that we have in this budget that we could offset with one-time surplus dollars from the last 2 years?
Okay, well, the 150,000 is not a one-time expense because it's in there every year. So while those items that we do to work on are one-time items, the money is not a one-time item. Right now, the area that one of the areas that we could look at could potentially be the charter schools, but what we'd like to do is, this is just a preliminary budget. We have work to do. There's going to be some areas to come in, and we have some thoughts. We've had some initial conversations on where we could spend that money and where we could use that money, or what areas we could potentially look to see if there's any further reduction. Again, as we go back into school, it would be nice to see all our charter school students go back to normal numbers, and then I can breathe a little easier as we do this. So we're going to take a hard look at what can be a one-time expense and consider that for. I can tell you that every department head and every building principal has worked very diligently in keeping the costs down and reducing it. If you take out some of the extraneous items, the departments and the building budgets are down. Just simply taking out the charter schools and the legal expenses, and then the departments as a whole are down. Every department's budget is down with the exception of curriculum, which has to go up. I mean, short of us doing another 1 year offset, but eventually you're going to have to pay the piper on that. And there's no way around that. We buy curriculum books. So there is some good reductions there that we've already done. So we're going to take a real hard look at it and see if there's areas that we can further reduce this in.
Yeah, and I would suggest we're talking about building budgets being down another 50,000. I think this is the second year in a row now that those building budgets were cut. It's painful to see us cutting building budgets when we're ending with a surplus every year. So I know this is a budgeting exercise, but I think that's something that we need to consider. Again, we come back to like the forecasts and where these things, where the I'm gonna say the errors are, but where the variances are. That's to me is critical in how we look at the budget for next year.
Any other questions or comments?
My only comment is, of course, is when we look at enrollment and we're looking at the number of students that we have and seeing our students and staff, since that is 65% of our budget, that's something that we need to look at. Looking at our staff, our classes, programming, and making sure we take a look at that. So.
Okay. Any other comments?
Anybody else, guys?
Yeah, I await your recommendation on the surplus as Ralph is talking. I certainly would look at, I'm looking at the debt here. That's where I would look for sure. I know that we don't have a lot callable immediately, but that doesn't mean there's not a possibility to pay down some of this, since we borrowed it in some of this, anticipating that we were going to have some issues. I think we need to make sure that we're using this money to reduce the long-term effect of that of some of this debt. So
I agree, and that's where the initial thought process would be to look at the long-term savings and where we could use that.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Tim, do you have anything else for us?
I do not. Let me get back to the agenda. And we are done the discussion topics.
Okay. Before we move to courtesy of the floor, any other comments by the committee members? Seeing none, we will turn our attention to courtesy of the floor. Since it's a new year and I do see some new names here, just like to remind everybody. Paul, do you have a question?
Sorry, I lost my,
Paul?
yeah. Can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Sorry about that. I did have one question. Where are we in the budgetary process in the reach? I just need a refresher. We were able to add, obviously going down to Skyview and up to the high school. I remember originally we had one budgeted and we were hoping to use grant money or something for the second half. I don't recall. I think we ended up just budgeting all that ourselves, if I recall. But I know that there's some interest in possibly looking at the elementary portion of that as well. So obviously it wasn't itemized, but I'm just curious of where we are on the reach portion of the budget.
I will get with Dr. Angstad upon the return and get you a firm answer on that. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I would like to have her weigh in on that, considering that's her area.
The answer is that all the levels now are budgeted for having, all levels will have the REACH program. There is an offset for the expenditure of the elementary program due to an anticipated grant from the Methacton Education Foundation. That will likely pay for the full $90,000 associated with the elementary program. So every level will have a REACH program, but there will not be I think, Tim, you accounted for it as revenue, correct?
That's correct. It's a revenue.
Yeah. So it's all in there.
Yeah, and so for the high school, I think we went down to Skyview in the budget, and then the high school we were going to do, if we could, is that in our budget in this calendar year? You don't have to answer now because I can't remember myself, but just to make sure there's not a budget increase related to either side of our COLA.
Well, there's an increase each year as part of our agreement with.
It's not a grant replacement, is what I'm saying. I thought there was some grant money at one point.
The high school is a grant replacement.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and that's about 100 and I'm gonna say it's in the neighborhood of $125,000–135,000. But the total sum, I believe, is in the neighborhood of $600,000 for the REACH program across the district, minus the $90,000 in the grant that we would be receiving from the Education Foundation.
Yeah, so the 125 would be the increased expenditure of this coming budget. So we should probably highlight that in the expenditures. So. Right, because we're not getting another grant, we don't believe, to run the high school REACH program.
That's correct.
Thank you.
However, there is another grant that Dr. Angstad is applying for. So as we talk right now, certainly things could change. But there's a separate grant from a state agency that we believe we're going to be able to receive.
Okay, good. Thank you.
One more question. Sorry, Drew. I'll play the role of Andrea tonight. Paul, thanks for asking that question because I think that was an important one around reach. It reminded me of something else. We have no personnel, we have no additional heads added into this budget, right? So if we were to go through and we were going to add a head somewhere for DEI, it would have to be a net neutral headcount addition, correct? At this point?
At this point.
Okay.
We certainly, the challenge is we have Dr. Campbell coming in to lead a process and have the greater community, both internally and externally within the district, help us, set the stage and the future work that's needed in the district. I think, as many of us have talked, once we know what work needs to get done and what the long-term strategy is for the district with regards to DEI implementation efforts, then I think we can decide whether or not, we need to, have what type of person to what type of salary, all that type of thing. And that's probably one of those things where, certainly we don't want to just assume, but, it's going to be one of those things, maybe we grant ourselves a one-time person through our fund balance to get that up and running if need be, or from one of the other committed fund areas. So I'm not suggesting that's a great plan, but I hate to budget a number too high or too low when I know, and as you can see, things are going to be rather challenging for us in terms of the path forward with this budget.
Yeah, I understand, and I'm bought into that, right? I mean, I completely.
And give their opinion on anything before the board or the committee. If you want to raise your hand, so I will work down my list here. First person up I see is Mr. Andrews. Mr. Andrews, give me a quick audio check there, please.
Testing.
Go ahead, Mr. Andrews, you are on.
So I see that the budget for this current year shows a considerable surplus, maybe 5 million. The product of the school district, of course, is educating students. And this year, so far, we've been crippled by the COVID. I don't think anyone can claim that the education being given to the students is up to norms. So, I have hopes, and maybe we all have hopes, that come the end of March or the end of April, pandemic-wise, that the kids can get back into the school full-time. So I'm suggesting the possibility that extending the school year 1, 2, or 3 weeks into June could get the kids' education back up to snuff, and it would, of course, cost some of that $5 million. So that's a suggestion for someone to blue sky look into the ins and outs of the possibilities there to get the education level up to what we would have in a usual year. That's my thought, where again, I repeat that educating students is the objective here, rather than having a surplus. So I yield the rest of my time to other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Dr. Malik, you are on.
You hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Jim Malik, Worcester. So a pattern has emerged here. Last 5 years, what we got is we overtax and we get a surplus. Then we overtax again and we get a surplus. Then we overtax again and we get a surplus. What kind of thought process goes into that kind of a situation? And now this year, we have another anticipated surplus. So I guess my question is, can you use the anticipated surplus to lower your anticipated tax increase of 3%? Could you do that? Would you do that? Would you consider that? I mean, this is like 6 years now in a multi-million-dollar surplus, and you don't do anything to rectify the problem. It's not good. As far as the PESERS fund goes, is it fair to say that you guys overfunded that Peasers fund with the surplus from last year? I saw the percent increase. Doesn't look like your percent increase adds up to the money that you put into the Peasers fund. Can we get that money back? Is that a possibility? I didn't hear any talk about that. I mean, I didn't hear any talk about giving any money back to the taxpayers who are hurting that you're overtaxing. So please think about discussing that maybe at a meeting. That'd be good. I've been trying to get the answer to this question, and hopefully you can help me. What's the total price tag or project cost for the proposed Eagleville project? I asked at the property committee, I couldn't get the number. Can you tell me what the price tag is? Is it $11 million? Because that's what I remember from the last presentation that KCBA presented. Can you just say yes or no? That is it 11 or no? Thank you for your help. Can I find the bid documents on the website anywhere? Were they posted to the website? Is there a reason why you guys don't post any of this information on the website for us to get? Okay. How can I get a copy of the bid documents for the Eagleville project? Is there a way, any other way than filing a right to know request to get those documents? Can you tell me so I don't have to waste time and effort to file a right to know request? No answer? Okay. Can you tell me why there was no competition for the position that KCBA Architects currently is in for the Eagleville project? Can you tell me why there was no fee negotiation for KCBA Architects for the Eagleville project? Why did you just accept their 7% demand? Can you tell me that one without negotiating it? Can you tell me who chose the plan that's currently being bid on for the Eagleville project? Can you tell me that one? So can you tell me where I can get the information? If you won't give it to me, can you tell me how to get the information? Can you direct me to the website, your website, or a link to get the information? Okay. Well, this is why you have a $175K right to know problem. And I guess my solution to your problem is you need to hire a different law firm. Worcester Township had
Thank you, Dr.
same
Malik.
problem.
That's your 4 minutes.
Oh, thanks for cutting me off.
Jessica Bradbury.
Hi, good evening. Jessica Bradbury, Lower Providence Township. Just a quick question because I heard you bring up the DE&I project today. I've been looking out for an update on it. I believe the work began in December, and I haven't seen on any of the committee meetings where we've discussed progress so far. So I'm wondering if we're going to see any updates anytime soon on the equity audit or the other work. I had asked back in November, when I'm looking, and I had pulled it up now at this proposal or statement of work or whatever you want to call it, it looks like it's deliverable based, right? We've got the work broken up into 3 phases, winter, spring, and summer, with a number of consultation activities, but nothing that would define acceptance criteria, and nothing besides the total cost of $30,000 that explains the payment terms. So how and when do we expect to incur these costs, and what are we going to do to verify that we're receiving the deliverables that we signed up to, we're paying for? That's really it. I am interested in this work, but I'm not sure why we sign proposals without understanding how and when we pay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan.
Good evening, everyone. Michael Ryan, Lower Providence. Just 3 quick points. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Winters for bringing up the possibility of looking into the long-term debt and bringing that number down with the surplus. Unfortunately, that was kind of overlooked last year, especially during the same time frame when we were looking at borrowing for Arrowhead. I definitely think that there's ways that can be done. And PFM kind of showed that there are ways that could be done with the way that they restructured some of the debt before. Second point would be the PD 2028. I know that Mr. Bricker said that it was kind of good for him because he didn't have to put it in the presentation. It was attached separately. I would just ask that each member of this committee go through that document. There is a benefit to going through line by line to find items that might have been glanced over. I don't even have to find an example of that, as one was already brought up in the REACH program. There should have been a $125,000 increase somewhere in that PDE document that hopefully one of you would have caught and then asked about. So I'm sure that there's many others of those, and if they happen to fall within the same category, say a $200,000 increase in one area and a $200,000 decrease in another area, that looks like it would just be flat overall in terms of a summary, you will be able to find the details and maybe be able to work this budget down. Third point I just want to bring up is the increase for the current budget to next year's budget for the salaries and benefits. It looks like a lot of the benefit number was coming from the increase in the medical. I do see that we are putting in an increase for salaries, and I was just wondering that now that we are putting in an increase in salaries, can the board talk about what assumptions are built into that? I know for the current year that we're in, there was a 0% increase put in. So the number of the increase for this year, is that assuming that you're going to retroactively increase for the current year and then another increase from that number to this? And maybe the board could kind of talk about that now that they're kind of building something in, because in my opinion, I think that this gets to some of the public input on salaries and contracts and paying the teachers a fair contract. Just keep in mind that I think that number was $2.4 million on that slide in terms of an increase in salary. So if you want to be able to pay your teachers, you also have to be willing to pay an increase in your real estate taxes. So maybe the board could touch on that a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Chunling Ma.
Hi, Chunling Ma, Worcester Township. Just want to comment on the 3% school tax increase. I just wonder if the board has been considering a lot of people have lost jobs during the pandemic, and some people, a lot of companies are not giving raises to employees. To have a job is already fortunate. So 3% increase on school tax, it just sounds too much, especially under such a situation. And also we have had 5+ years of surplus, budget surplus. So why can we use this kind of money to compensate what we're planning in the budget? And also, I think our school ranking, this district ranking has been dropping in the past few years. And a lot of reason, I think it has something to do with the teachers. We cannot offer competitive salaries to the teacher. Can we use the surplus money on the salary increase? Just like Mr. Ryan just mentioned, we'd like to have a better picture on how we're going to increase the teacher's salary. I would suggest using the surplus money, either return to taxpayers, like Mr. Malik said, or I'd like to see this surplus money to use for the teacher salary. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ma. I am seeing no other hands. All right, that brings courtesy of the floor to an end. Any other comments from the committee members? Mr. Navarrete?
Yeah, just a quick one on Dean Guy, since I brought it up to Ms. Bradbury. Yeah, the teams, the leadership teams as part of this effort have been selected, and we'll have an update in the January meetings about where we are in that process. And you should look for an update every board meeting thereafter.
And Mr. Navarrete, you might not know this, but by the end of this week, there'll be a letter going out to the community on the status of the efforts as part of Dr. Campbell's plan.
Mr. Winters?
Just a couple of points. One, for Mr. Andrews, we did talk at the education meeting about additional supports for those that are needing additional supports and what that needs to be done and how that looks with the extended services this year and in the summer. I imagine that some of these questions around the Eagleville project that were also asked, I believe, at the property meeting, my understanding, listening in, is that there are some of those that could be put out for easier submission. Let's do that. Mr. Ryan, I will say that on Friday this week, we have gone, mutually agreed to go into fact finding. And I think what Tim said is what he put in the budget was the authorization given by the board for those numbers. And we're not going to talk about those, but that is what was put in the budget process. Tim, if you give me a nod if that was right or not.
It's not just that, but it's all the different labor unions.
Yeah. But the assumptions on the authorization that was given by the board associated with each of those negotiations.
Correct.
Yeah. So the hearing, or I'm not sure what it's called exactly, the proceeding will be this Friday. So that will be one of the significant steps in the fact-finding process. And for Ms. Ma, the 3% in the budgetary process, this is not I'm just trying to make sure you understand the process. This is the preliminary budget. In the month of January, February, if we were going above the Act 1 index, which was 3%, and this year is 3%, then we would need to submit the request to go above it by taking exceptions. We're not eligible for the exceptions, and we don't have an interest for taking the exceptions. And it's a preliminary process that there's many iterations of the budget, and the 3% budget that is on the line or first submitted here is very preliminary, and at least from my perspective, expect to drive that down much, much lower. It is not a tell everybody that this district is raising their taxes 3% because the process. I know 5 or 6 years ago I was accused of raising taxes 6% in January when it had nothing to do with where the rate actually ended up finishing it. So, just a comment there. Thanks, Drew.
Ms. Kanker?
No comment.
Okay. Paul, you kind of took my last, I don't know, parting shot's the wrong word, but all numbers discussed here are the first flag in the sand, and the 3%, as Mr. Winters just had mentioned, is the ceiling. So we're going to do our best, and hopefully some of the assumptions are high, and the number will come down. But by no means did we just increase your taxes by 3% in January. Mr. Bricker, you have your virtual hand up. I'm assuming that's a mistake?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's it. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Mr. Winters, and a second by Mr. Navarrete. We will adjourn the meeting at 8:18 p.m. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.